Welcome, everyone. We're glad that you're here. Glad that I'm here. So the internet wasn't working earlier, but we made it. And today we are going to be talking about reading resumes and really how people are not reading resumes because of how reading is changing. And the research around that is pretty fascinating. So, we're going to look at some of that research. And then we're going to look at resumes specifically and how we use this design research, when we're writing a resume. I've got a few examples that I'm going to show you. So let's dive right into some of this research. Pretty interesting stuff. I'm going to pull up a part of the Resume Writing Academy website where we have an article that you can look at that shows you where this all comes from. So a lot of times when people talk about design, they tend to talk about it in terms of aesthetics. And of course, the aesthetics are important, how something looks and your resume, it's the first thing someone's going to see about you. Those aesthetics matter. Now, a lot of times people say, oh, it has to be ATS compliant, applicant tracking system friendly. And we'll talk about that a little bit as well. However, a human hires a human. We need to make sure your resume will get through that applicant tracking system. I don't want it to get kicked out. And you can design a eye-pleasing resume that will follow the research design tips that we're going to talk about today, and also will pass through an applicant tracking system. You don't have to do either or. Most hiring managers will be looking at your actual resume when they're deciding whether or not to bring you in for an interview, not the applicant tracking system output. It's stripped down of all the formatting. Some recruiters might look at that if they like to, but it really isn't easy for them to get through. So that's what the computer reads. The human reads the Microsoft Word document that you are going to upload, send in somehow. That's what the human is going to read. And you do want to use Microsoft Word still today, because some applicant tracking systems won't score a PDF. There are 290 systems, so do we know if it will or won't? Let's just not use it. We don't need to go to a PDF to make things work. We can use a Word document and upload it into that system. We'll talk a little bit about applicant tracking systems as we go, but our main goal today is to look at what does the research say about design? And most of the research that you find about design, so this is on the Resume Writing Academy website. Under free resources, you have these resume writing articles. And this one is called Write for the Modern Reader, because it talks about how readers are reading differently. They're skimming. It's hard for readers to read a long portion of text. Many people aren't reading books anymore, and you can follow some of those early links to look at some of that fascinating data. So what we look at is, how do people read a website? Because a website is going to be read very closely to how your resume is going to be read. Quickly, looking for specific information, scanning. So when we do that, this is showing that when someone reads a website, they spent 2.6 seconds. Anybody want to guess, or have you heard, how many seconds do recruiters typically look at resumes? Do we have any guesses? Let me see here. Any guesses on how many seconds a recruiter looks at a resume? And it takes a little while for your comments to come through, so I'll give you a little bit of time to guess before I give you the answer. And this is based on research, as much research as we can do. This is an eye tracking study that it's been done in 2005, updated in 2008, and then the Bladders actually just re-updated their eye tracking study in 2018. It's a little harder to get all the details of that data, but we still have some of the best practices, and we'll be talking a little bit about that today. So someone is saying 6 seconds. Yay, Arlene, yes, 6 seconds is how long reviewers tend to look at a resume. This is also showing that 20% of the words on the page are what people read. It's going to be very similar for a resume. This is website research. And then that we tend to look at big portions at a time, which is one of the reading methods that we're going to look at today. So there are reading patterns, and this graphic here is really small, so I'm going to bring this up bigger here in just a minute. But there are patterns that show how the eye reads when it's reading text. And that's what we want to look at when we're talking about designing a resume, is how do we design it to get the most content read. If you're a resume writer, you're spending 2 to 4 to 8 hours writing someone's resume, all of that doesn't matter if the design doesn't help the reader get through the content. If you're a job seeker and you're out there struggling, maybe spending hours and hours on your resume, you don't want all of that to be for naught, because it's not designed to move the eye through the content. So that's what we're going to talk about now. And yes, Courtney, 6 seconds. Wow. That's why this is so important, because we want people to be able to read through it quickly. So readers are not reading, they're skimming. This is much more true for our LinkedIn profiles and our resumes. So I tend to say resume, but LinkedIn profiles follow a lot of this same content area, a lot of this same rules, if you will. So let's look at some of these research-based formatting techniques. And we'll see if my screen will be nice to me and let me share this the way I want to. Let me see here. Let's see what we can do about this. Okay, there we go. So when we are looking at reading patterns, and hopefully you can see this. Let me see if I can get it a little bit bigger. The first one is F-shaped, and we're going to look at all these in a resume, but just so you get a general idea. Our eye moves across the top, down the left, and then kind of chooses some other places to move right on a page. An F, with maybe a couple extra goings across the page. Layer cake means that we tend to look for headings or chunks of organization of content that helps us know these are the areas that we should skim. Bypassing means that if the first line of the word starts, or this first line of text starts with the same word over and over again, we'll tend to skip it. We'll look at how that might come across in a resume here in a second. And then spotting is that we're looking for something specific and we're going to go out and find it. Biggest example with this in a resume is education. You do not need to put your education toward the top of a resume unless you're a recent graduate. Even if your education is important for what you do, that recruiter knows where to find it. They will spot it and make sure that it's there, even on a 2-page resume. They know it's going to be towards the end on a resume. They'll go and they'll find it. They use spotting pretty well to find what they want to find. Our job is to make it easy for them to find those things by using some of these patterns that we're going to talk about today. So let's get into some of the resumes. That's what everybody wants to see, right? We want to see some resumes. So let's look at a simple one first. We're going to look at this F pattern and how does this come out in a resume. So this is one of the examples we've used for a training in the past. So it's somewhat anonymized. And we get right away the person's name and their address information. So this starts some of the F pattern. Now we've got their title here in the middle. We could pull that over to the left. It'll make it easier for them to find. Do we really need it to be that easy for them to find? Those are, questions you would have that you could go through. Then we're going to exploit the F pattern a little bit with this content here, that right after I read mechanical engineer, I'm highly likely to also stop on something else that is popping out. Then I've got my engineering experience and education. So this is actually pulled to the middle for a reason, because of course we're working with a student. They don't have that much experience in education. So we want the reader to hit this BS in mechanical technology early on. And that's why it's over here on the left and it's bold. It's part of that main F that I want my reader to see, is that mechanical engineering degree. Then in this setting, these kind of jobs are set up as part of the F pattern, but they're not drawing the eye too much because they're just projects within school, right? So you get the problems, the actions, and the outcomes, and that gives the eye those definitions. So this is the layer cake coming in I can see the problem, actions, outcomes. I can decide which one I want to dive in because that layer cake is all set up for me right there to know what I want to dive into. And the projects are done that way as well. Now, what you get, and this is something that I work with professional writers on a lot, is the idea of chunks. So this job, if you will, job project at school is significantly separated from the next project at school, this Colorado Department of Transportation. So these two projects, actually three projects when we look at the full example, those projects are clearly separated both by space and by the underline that is under the next project. It makes it really easy for the eye to skim and say, okay, there's three projects here. They all have problem, action, outcomes. And depending on the reader, they're going to start where they find it most interesting. So if I've got an engineer that's looking at this resume, they're probably going to look at some of the actions, maybe the problem. When I'm talking to an HR person, they might go to the outcomes first. That's what these types of organization systems allow your resume to do, is be skimmed by different readers who are looking for different things, all quite easily because you've shown all of them where they can find what they're looking for. Some of the other tips that this resume just demonstrates are short paragraphs. So you'll see that everything is short. When we have a long paragraph or a long list of bullets defeat the purpose of a bullet. Stay away from those. And I'm talking more than 5 or 6 in a line, in a stack. If you have more than 5 or 6 bullets in a stack, the eye kind of goes, I don't know what's important because you've said everything is important. And so I'm not going to read it. Long paragraphs, which today is really like more than 3 or 4 lines on a resume, the eye says, oh, too much there for me to skim. I've only got 6 seconds, so I'm not even going to bother. So if you are writing long paragraphs on your resume, they are not being read. The eye is saying, I can't even bother with that right now in my 6 seconds. And so it's not going to take the time to read it. It's most likely going to skim the first line. That's our F. And then move down the page on the left-hand side to find the next place to read over. So that F is really important to help the eye figure out what it wants to read by making it easy to find things down the left and then across in specific areas of the page. And this next one makes it even clearer. So I will see if we've got any other comments here. Any other questions? Not yet. Let's see what we've got here with our next one. So this one is a CEO level person, and we have the same basic pieces going on here, where we have this at the top. You know, obviously people want to know their name. They want to know what do they do. And then some readers are going to read this. Some readers won't. Recruiters, lots of people that are doing the initial scan of a resume won't read this. People who are the hiring manager will read that to get a feel for who this person is, what they think about themselves. You've got some elements of quick reading here, short paragraphs, not long, and then you move into the key wins that are short sentences. Easy to skim, easy to see what's going on at the beginning. So let's look at that bypass. So here we've got a different word that leads each bullet. If each of these bullets started with the word increased, it would be highly likely that that reader would not read the subsequent bullets. Our brain just assumes that they're all the same if it all starts with the same word, which is why we as resume writers really try to vary our language. It makes it interesting to read, but it also engages this part of the brain in saying, hey, that's something new for me to skim or read. Whereas if I see increase, 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 especially all in a row, my brain is going to kick into that bypassing pattern, and it's going to bypass those sentences that it thinks are the same. Remember, I'm in a hurry, I don't have much time, and therefore if I think something's repetitive, I'm not going to read it. So varying the verbs, because we want most of our bullets in a resume to start with the verb, varying those is really important. Other thing, Reduce your amount of adjectives, especially in this summary section. People are tired of reading, that you're a results oriented, highly dynamic leader. Get to the point as much as possible, which is why I love these kind of key wins in a summary. They're specific, there's no adjectives, it gets right down to business, showing me how this person is dynamic or results oriented instead of telling me that they are. And when readers are moving quickly, and especially when you've got recruiters that are seeing hundreds of resumes per position, they don't want all those adjectives. Show me who you are, show me what's important to you without telling me in that flowery language. You can still have some of what they do and what's important to them. But like here we have guide transformation. So instead of saying I'm a transformational leader, tell me what you've done that shows you're a transformational leader. Keeping it active, telling those things in verbs. Now here, as we continue on with our F reading pattern and our layer cake, those are the two biggest ones we see in resumes. You'll see that the F says, okay, here's the important information coming down the left side. And then it's highly likely that on this job titles are highly important to recruiters. On this job title, the I is going to go to the right. It's going to skim across. This is even more true if you put the date out there. So we want to think about, do I want to draw the I over there to the date or not? Sometimes we do because this person has a good tenure. Sometimes we don't if they've been to the title and probably the line right under the title. So don't waste that line right under the title with responsibilities included. Take that off your resume in general, but especially don't waste that line right under the title, which they're going to look at. Their eye is also going to catch that first line right under it. Here we've created a layer cake for the results. So instead of having one long list of bullets, this would have been 6 bullets in a row, we created the layer cake of beat competitors to a market shift and improved quality. So I'm showing 2 different skill sets, breaking up the bullet and creating that layer cake pattern that shows someone, here's where you can read about my results, and here's where you can read about a different type of results. And this would obviously continue as we go through the resume. You continue that pattern, continue the layer cake that makes it easy for people to find the information that they're looking for. And when we do that and we use those reading patterns, it demonstrates that research shows that more content gets consumed. Yay, that's our whole purpose, right? We want someone to read this resume. Now, you might be thinking, are those things applicant tracking system compliant? Because you've probably heard that shading is not applicant tracking system compliant. Yes, it is. You can use shading, and there's research that shows one color is visually pleasing. Even in a resume, people like a little bit of color. One color is fine. Do you have to use it? No. But shading is fine. Lines are fine. They're not going to mess up an applicant tracking system. Putting your dates out to the right or not. Applicant tracking systems don't care. Leading with the company or the title. They don't care. So it gives you all those options of doing things the way you need to do it. And what about this graphic? Applicant tracking systems won't count it. They won't score it, but they won't dismiss the resume because it's there. That's for your human reader who is going to go back and download the Word document that was uploaded and share it with their hiring team electronically or paper, depending on what they do. Obviously, right now, probably electronically, but you might still have people who are going to print it at home while they're doing their interview because they don't want to be looking at their screen in split screen or whatever, right? That's for your human reader. Applicant tracking systems will still score this resume. They just won't score that graphic. A lot of misconception out there about that. And you're hurting yourself by following some of those false rules and designing a resume that doesn't draw the eye. Lines really help create that F pattern. Spacing, of course. So you can see here we've got good spacing between the sections, good spacing between the jobs. And shading also helps, similar to lines. So you can use shading to create the same function that you're getting from a line, which is to create that F pattern and make it easy for the eye to find things. Now, on this example, since it is a 2-page example, the education is at the bottom. And this person is higher up in leadership. Their degree isn't something that we need to draw a lot of attention to, but it's here. And the person who's reading will do the spotting pattern and come and look for it so that they can find that education. We don't need to make it overly apparent unless we're working with a new graduate who wants to position themselves as a new graduate, like our other example, Mr. Seth Green. So those are just 2 examples of how we can use, especially the F pattern and layer cake, focusing on the titles, knowing that those are going to draw attention. What does the line right under that do? Using some bold to draw attention to the layer cake. And in this example, you have that piece of it. So it's just what works for you and your clients. So, any other questions on those examples or how those come together? Feel free to email me or actually just message here or type here, and I will find you, respond to you. Or, like I said at the beginning, you can check out this. You can check out the Resume Writing Academy website and the resources that we have there. So that's the other resource that you have available to you, is the Resume Writing Academy website. There we go. This is the right one. So there's some other articles on here as well, and some samples for you to look at. We've got some samples of modernizing your CV and a sample in the executive resumes. I hope that's helpful, and seeing those in action. And we'll see you next week here back on Facebook and YouTube.